All right. So, hi, everyone. I'm Sanjana. I'm back. And who am I here with today?
Hi, I'm Till. I'm a German anthropologist, now based out of Switzerland, and kind of left academia a few years after, or 2 years after finishing my PhD, but still kind of in the transitioning phase. Yeah.
Okay. Well, it's so nice to have you here today. Our first question for you. So, you work in consulting currently. So, can you tell us a little bit about your clients? How do you help them? Is there a bit of an anthropological twinge to it?
um, sure. Yeah. So it's a little bit of a longer story, right? But essentially, what I'm doing now is working with different organizations, consultancies, and we work with different organizations focusing on organizational culture, right? So culture within the companies in organizations. And it's quite interesting because normally when we think about culture from an anthropological perspective, we think about something that that we are born into, right? A culture that we are born into.
Hmm.
There are various definitions of culture out there, but a lot of things play into it, right? Our history, our language, um, spirituality, whatever you might call it. So we are born into it, and it's part of ourselves or one of ourselves, however you want to define it.
Yeah.
Um, and it's very hard, I would say, to leave our culture behind, right? Because it's always part of it we are born into. We can move from country to country, but part of our culture always stays with us.
Exactly.
Right? When we look at company culture, it's quite different, right? Because also there are similar forces that come together, and I would say that culture always emerges when people interact, right, in a certain structure, and if they're pursuing a certain purpose. So culture always emerges then. And when we see this within companies, and we speak about company culture, people have quite quite a difficulty to grasp the concept of culture within this work environment, right? They say, oh yeah, even if we work with companies that operate globally and have employees in different countries, they say, yeah, we bring our culture into the company, right? And how we work together. And I think this is true to a certain regard, but then there's a new culture forming once people start interacting and working together,
Yeah.
right? And I think there's a difference. So there's a very interesting aspect to that. And I think anthropologists have looked at organizational culture, I think starting back from the 1920s. There's specific research coming out of Japan initially, but over the time, and I think in more recent years, it has picked up because culture has also become a very hot topic within business schools, right? Because it is so important. And there is even the saying that from an Austrian American consultant who says culture eats strategy for breakfast. So there's this whole idea of culture being very important for organizations, for companies to be successful in the long run. But a lot of companies and a lot of employees don't know how to speak about culture, right? Or how to make it tangible and thus shapeable at the end. Because first we have to understand what our culture is, identify the strengths and weaknesses within, right, within this context of an organization that pursues a certain strategy or purpose. May be more profitable, be it more on the humanitarian side, whatever this may be. So I think there's a very good place for anthropologists coming in because social culture anthropologists, we spend a lot of time dealing with different concepts of culture. We often have long-term field research, studying particular networks, groups, communities, working with different people. And I think we can bring a different perspective, right, into this kind of consultancy work. And this is basically what I'm doing now. So I'm working on the one hand with a consultancy that already has like their own methodology. So I'm coming just in to bring fresh perspective, right? And I think for us anthropologists, it's good to state that we are an anthropologist, that this is our strength, right? That we bring in a different perspective, that we have this different training and methodology to look at people and how people act and behave in a different way. And I think this is a strength that we should make, that we should be able to communicate. And I think there's a growing market for that outside academia, and a value, and a lot of people still don't know what anthropology is.
Yeah.
But it's sexy, right? It has a sexy ring to it when you say you're an anthropologist. And nowadays people are, maybe too shy to admit that they don't know it, but they know that it's something important and something, it's meaningful.
Yeah.
It's, oh, an anthropologist. Oh, we have an anthropologist. There's a lot of respect for that as well. So, yeah. So this is one thing I'm doing at the moment. Yeah.
That sounds super cool. And I agree with you. I think that in any business setting, anthropology is relevant, almost any work setting. So I love seeing how you can bring the skills you learned in your undergrad and master's to where you are today. Let's talk about your PhD a little bit. So you studied in Ethiopia, the salt trades. How did you end up there? What led you to Ethiopia?
Yeah, so this is also, again, I have to go back a little bit. Before doing my PhD, I had already spent, I think, 3 years living in Ethiopia. I did 2 exchange semesters during my undergrad and my graduate studies at 2 different universities in Ethiopia. Additionally, I worked for some German non-political organization, as well as some other work. I worked as a German tour guide for German tourists visiting Ethiopia. So I'd done a lot of different works in Ethiopia.
Okay.
Always related to my studies and fieldwork. Even before that, even before I started my degree, my undergrad degree, which was in African studies with a focus on anthropology, sociology, and political science, I spent over a year in South Africa and then traveled through the African continent for 5 months backpacking at the age of 21, I think. So I came through Ethiopia, and Ethiopia had always fascinated me for different reasons. And then, as I said, during my undergrad and my graduate studies, I had the opportunity to do this exchange semester at universities in Ethiopia. And I think this is the great thing of being a student, right? That you have these opportunities, right? Do an exchange semester or work somewhere, do an internship. And I think it's very important to grasp these opportunities. And so it took me, I think, 4 years for my undergrad, another 3 years for my master's. But because I took my time, right? Because I enjoyed being a student, I enjoyed making these different experiences. And I think it's something very valuable that you don't rush things, but look for opportunities. And I think there's so much opportunities out there for students in terms of scholarships or more practical experiences, internships, etc. And so I had this connection and friendships in Ethiopia already before starting my PhD. And it then just naturally emerged somehow that after I graduated from my master, I was like, okay, now what do I do? And for me, the logical step was to pursue a career in academia, stay in academia, but I also wanted to have the chance to do long-term research again, like for a year, full immersive classical ethnographic fieldwork. This was something that I wanted to do, that I was curious doing, and I felt if I don't do it now and use this opportunity that I have, I will miss out on. So I went back to Ethiopia, went back to to the people that I knew from my previous days, and just listen to people, talk to people, and then got a sense of, yeah, what is important at the moment, what is happening. And I kept meeting the same people from the same region. They told me the same stories about the salt trade and the salt and the history of it. So I thought, okay, this is actually very interesting to look at, right? So I didn't pursue it at first. I had an idea of the region and had a feeling there's something interesting happening, but I went in with an open mind and then listened to people and spent about 3-4 months just talking to people, learning the language of these particular groups. And then, yeah, after a while, found that the salt trade and its history might be a very interesting lens to look at some current issues. So this is how I then ended up and working with these communities on this topic. Yeah.
So did you take this road trip in South Africa and Africa before undergrad or before your master's? Where in the timeline was that?
Oh, sorry. That was before my undergrad. So this was, yeah. So I started my undergrad a little bit late, I think when I was 22 or 23. So I did all of that. All of that before I went to uni. And I think the trip and the time in South Africa inspired me to go into,
Right. That's what it
African
sounds
studies
like.
and anthropology. So
That's
uh,
awesome. That's such a good example of exactly that. If you have any opportunities to travel abroad, study abroad, take it because you don't know if it'll influence what you want to do later in your life. So that's really, really cool. Now, you're currently, or how did you get from where you were with classical anthropology to now? And how do you use the skills? Like, are there any transferable skills that you had before that you still use in your work today? Because as anthropologists and students in anthropology, we're always trying to kind of see what skills we get and how they are applied to the workforce. So are there any specific ones that you use constantly today?
sure, I would say observation. I think observation and listening.
Huge
These
one,
are
yeah.
the two most important skills that we are developing as anthropologists, and the kind of this unbiased approach that we have when we encounter new people or groups of people, right? I think one of the strengths of anthropology is that it teaches us to be very open and receptive to our surroundings, and that
Yeah.
we are very non-judgmental, right? And then we try to understand people from their perspectives, how they act, the way they act, listen to them, but then also, yeah, observe, because there's the saying, right, within anthropology, people do not what they say, and they say what they don't do,
Mm.
right? So this chiasmic saying why participant observation is so important, and I think this is a very, very valuable skill to have, or two valuable skills, right? First, to be very attentive and listening in an unbiased, non-judgmental way, and really try to understand people's standpoint, right? Even if you don't necessarily agree with it. And I think in today's world, it becomes very. If you look at any discussion at the moment, it's always black against white. It's
Exactly,
always
two-sided.
exactly, and there's no gray in between. And I think this anthropology has the strength to work in between, right? Into connecting different worlds, different perspectives, bring them together and make up something new, right? And I think this is always what fascinated me about anthropology, this very open-minded approach, right? This unbiased approach that you try to take a step back yourself, right? And you listen to people and try to understand them. And the second thing is just your observational skills, right?
Mhm.
Just being able to observe. And I think this is a great skill to have as well. Just, and you can practice this, and we practiced this even during our PhD. We would just sit sit somewhere in a park in London or outside, and you just observe. You observe people, you observe the weather, you observe trees, nature. You have your notebook with you, right? You take some notes. You try to be receptive to the environment, right? You go to the same place, to the same cafe every day. You observe the people come in. All these kind of things are very important skills to develop, because if you go into a business setting, or the private sector outside academia, these skills can serve you well, right? Everything, of course, moves way faster than it does within anthropology, and you will never have the time again to do like a 1 year immersive field work and these kind of things. But if you take the training seriously, I think it makes you very open and receptive to how people interact, how people engage, and what is there to observe. What other disciplines simply won't teach you.
Very, very true. So do you say that, or would you say you use those skills in your work today, like the listening and the observational, or are there any other ones that you find most useful?
Yeah, I mean, those skills also influence me in my daily life. Also now with my son who's 10 months
Right.
old, right? So I'm also trying to take an observant position when he's doing something, and just look and observe and see what he's doing. And then when he, I don't know, because he's curious, right? And I don't want to intervene or interfere too
Right.
much, right? So I think it's a good skill also to have in your daily
Yeah,
life. Just be
that's great.
very, and I see this now with my son, that it also helps me being, because being a parent and being a father is scary, because you don't know what's happening. You have this small little human to take care of.
Yeah.
But having that, and being able to just observe what he's doing, let him explore and be curious, and then as soon as you realize, okay, this might get too dangerous or there's some risk, of course you have to intervene.
Then you stop.
Um, Another skill I think which is important is interviewing, right? Interview skills, qualitative, like biographical interviews. Again, it's very much developing your listening skills, right? Talking to people in this context now. Again, being able to take yourself back, having a certain open-ended structure in mind, and again, because there is so much value in letting people talk, right, about their experiences. And I think there's, especially in the private sector, there's a lot of focus on quantitative methods, right? But I don't think that everything that is quantifiable is valuable.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah, big ones. So this is our last question. In one of my classes, it's called Anthropology of Thinking and Practice. We talk a lot about anthropological jargon and if jargon's bad, if it's good, when to use it, when not to use it, and if using academic jargon makes pieces of writing inaccessible for the public. We want everyone to be able to read our pieces. So we were just wondering if you had a favorite term or anthropological jargon. It could even be like business slang that you use. Some people said grassroots. Someone said inconsumability. I think I said intersectionality. So it's just a little question from our class.
Oh wow. Oh yeah, interconnectedness.
Ooh,
Yeah,
that's a good one.
yeah, interconnectedness. Um, yeah,
Very relevant in an anthropology.
it is. It's good to throw in, and then yeah, but we have to look at the interconnectedness of all things. Right? Um,
So true.
uh,
It's a very interesting conversation because sometimes you want to use the words that really convey what you're thinking, but then you want it to also be digestible from
yeah.
just the average person. But I think there's a right place and a wrong place for jargon. And I really agree with the sentiment you were saying before of the neutrality anthropologists can bring to the table. I think that's something that I love that I'm learning from anthropology because,
Mm,
like you mentioned, I use it in my daily life. I think just being able
mm.
to take an unbiased stance in basically every environment. Well, that brings us to the end. Thank you so much for being here. And
Sure.
yeah, it was great. I thought some of the insight you brought was fantastic. Um, but yeah, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and thank you so much for coming.
Thank you very much for having me.
Of
That
course.
was amazing. Thanks.
Bye.
Okay, bye.